So welcome to another in my series of badly drawn blogs. Today I'm talking about building RESTful APIs in the SAP NetWeaver Cloud. So with the application that we built, we had some RESTful APIs, and this is a little bit of detail about what we did and how we did it. So a little bit different today because my drawing skills aren't quite brilliant enough to be able to show you exactly all the code, and I'm not going to redraw it. So we're going to try something a little bit magical. I'll use my trophy that I got here from the Mastering SAP Technologies Demo Jam and see if it can work a little bit of magic to bring us up. So here goes. Okay, so thought it might be an idea to actually have a look through the code. So this is the code which is covered in this blog, but sometimes it's nice to actually have someone talk you through it. So I'm running at a ridiculously tiny resolution today because make it easier for you to see. So I'm just going to have a look at this timesheet entry servlet class, and we'll look at the doPost method. So here we go. So just talk through what's actually happening. So the very first thing that's happening in this post method is something to do with cause, which I'm going to cover in a different blog, so I'm not going to talk about. That's useful, isn't it? The next thing that we do is actually try and see, does this user exist? Are they authorized to access this resource? And does this resource exist? So I'm just going to drill into this one method. The first thing that we do in that method is actually get who is my user. So I'm going to authenticate myself. Do I actually have access to this? So that uses this get user if valid. So this is something I covered in one of my other blogs. Its top bit is about cookies. That's if you're using the web access rather than using basic authentication. So we pull up the basic authentication header, decode it, and then just check to see does it match with the user ID that I say that I am. Now I've done that using also just check to see if the device isn't blocked, because we have this ability to be able to block our device for a given time. See my other blog for a bit more detail on that. But I'm using this bcrypt library now, so it's a slight change because Frank pointed out that it's a bad idea to store your passwords in plain text. So I'm actually using a bcrypt hash password, which is much more secure and was really easy to implement as well. Now you'll see loads of these logger debug entries all through my code. I could probably reduce my code by half if I got rid of them. But they were a really useful way to actually, when I was coding, to see what was actually happening. So if an entry has been found, well, that's not good because I'm in a post. I'm trying to create an entry. So at this point we send a 303 message back which says, hey, you should be looking elsewhere. It's not really that they should be looking elsewhere, it's just they shouldn't be trying to do a post. But 303 is still relevant, and then we set the header with because the 303 requires a location header. Now, in the good case that the entry isn't found, then we actually want to create one. So the very first thing that we have to do is get the entry from the request. So I'm just going to drill into that. This bunch of guff here basically just pulls the body of the request back from the request and converts it into a string, which I can use and debug out there. And in order to read the code, I'm using this Google JSON parser, which is a brilliant and easy way of getting hold of the JSON, and it will throw exceptions if the JSON is malformed. So I don't have to worry about trying to do all of that. What I do need to do is actually check that the entry which is in the body of the request is the same entry as the resource, because it wouldn't be good that they try to create one using a different resource path. Now, I do have a small exception there because I do allow you to have a blank. That's okay. You can create, if you pass me a blank resource ID, I will create one for you because I'm nice like that. But if you send a value and it doesn't agree with what's in the body, then I'm going to throw a JSON parsing exception, and you'll get a 400 response saying you've got malformed JSON. So you can see how easy it is to use this JSON. I'll just do entry JSON get billable, get as boolean, and set billable. There you go. That was incredibly easy. A little bit of fun here. The hours. Joe insisted in sending hours across as strings rather than as numbers. It was easier for her. But in the case where a 0 came across, it was coming across as a quote quote, and the JSON was not happy with that. He was quite happy if there was a quote number quote, but just quote quote it would not interpret it as 0, so I had to force that through. And we get everything else, and we create our data object here, and then we return it. And obviously if there's anything that goes wrong, then we throw JSON parsing exceptions. So if everything's gone right here, if we've got a JSON parsing exception, we'd have thrown a 400 and told you that something's wrong, and you have to try and guess what it was. Yes, I could probably be a bit nicer there. So what we actually do is store the information into the database. So I'm just going to open this, and that's where we start actually accessing our data access objects. So if the data access object doesn't exist, then I go and create it. And once it exists, then I can update or add entry. So the very first thing that we do here is call this select settings. So we just have a look, which is select ID from table name where ID equals. So that basically says, does it already exist? So if this entry already exists, then it will return an entry. But if it doesn't, so it does not have a next entry, well then I'm going to create one for it, and if it doesn't even have an ID at all, then I'm going to be nice and I will create one for it and set it. At that point then we just do an insert. So we insert blah blah blah, and you can see how irritating this code is. So you've got to put all these different things in, and you've got to remember to have the right number of these question mark things, and it's painful. And then you've got to list them all down here and so on. You can see it's a little bit of fun with the booleans there. So database doesn't have a default boolean data type, so I store it as a y or a no, yes or a no. It makes sense. Well, I got fed up with storing x's and blanks. No, it's just too ABAPy. Anyway, if the entry does exist, of course, then it's an update and not an insert. So we do an update, and that just does an update with all the same things. And you can see that, again, a real pain in the arse to type out. And we've posted everything through, and it's been created. Hooray. Back, 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 back. And so it's been stored. So then we're going to send an email. Now I'll cover that in different blogs. There's some fun stuff happening with the email sending. And then we're going to output the response. So I'll open that up. So here, one of the important things that I have is the root URL, because all of the URLs that I generate, because my resources give references to their parent resources and their child resources within them, but they're all relative to the current URL. So this is nice so that I don't have to do any kind of worrying about the server. Whatever URL you've managed to get to this servlet with is obviously a valid one, so I'll just send it back, the same idea back to you. So we have got the URL, and then we just call this on my data object with the entry get JSON object, which uses this JSON object as well, and populates all the attributes of my object into it, and you can see here it's doing things. So like the date is actually an attribute of the associated day, not of the entry. However, my resource does not have to be a representation of my objects. So the resource is what makes sense for the resource, and so I can put it together however I want to. In this case, what made the coding easier for me was to have a data model which had a day above resource. So for a given date, all of the there were a bunch of entries underneath it. So I can just go into associated day, and you can see timesheet day, and that has a list of entries which you can add. I'm going to drill back. So the idea that my data model and resource model can and are, in this case, different, can be. So then I just convert that to a string and output it as an application JSON. So that's really very, very simple. And what I can show you if I scroll down here a bit is that for the put, so we've got the do put here, it's doing very similar. It's calling the authorize validate, same method, getting the entry from request, same method, storing, same method, output response, same method. So you can see here it's really very simple to reuse if you can manage to group your coding together to reuse them to get the same thing. So that output response is used by the get, the put, and the post. Whereas the do delete just has a very simple response, which is just the ID, because we needed to put that in because we found that we were making asynchronous calls to the delete, and we didn't know which one was being deleted. So we actually return that this is the ID that has been deleted, and that made our JavaScript an awful lot easier to write. So there you go. I hope that was useful. There's a little bit more detail in the blog, and you can have a little bit more time to peruse the code. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate, write them in the blog below. And I'll get back to you. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope this little video run through the code was useful for you. Cheers.